Hello everyone, it's Greg from Edinburgh Renaissance Fencing Academy here again. Today I want to talk once more about swords, and I want to give you a few tips about choosing a really good training sword for practicing Italian rapier. Particularly focusing on the earlier styles, either the late 16th century schools of, for example, Di Grassi, or the early 17th century schools of, for example, Capoferro. So up here, I'm going to put the specifications for an average period sword, an original antique sword from round about 1600. So this is basically what our weapons are trying to simulate when we train. So I'm going to talk today about one of the training swords I've got, this one. So it's a swept hilt rapier, of course. This is one of the first rapiers I bought. I think it's the first training rapier I bought new, direct from a swordsmith. And I want to just do a little overview of the design of it and talk about a little flaw that it has. And this is quite common in modern reproductions. So let's compare the specifications of this with the historical ones. So firstly, the blade length, which is quite important for a rapier. So the blade length measured from the cross of the hilt to the tip of the sword over here is 106 centimeters. So that's actually pretty close to the average original of 109 centimeters. It's certainly well within the sort of parameters or the extremes of historical models. So the blade length is good. The point of balance of this, which is also measured from the cross of the sword, so it's the point of balance in front of this cross, is 11 centimeters, more or less, on this sword, which is a couple of centimeters nearer the hand than the originals. But that's not a deal breaker. Again, it's actually within the parameters of historical swords, just a little bit below average. If we take a look at the design of the blade, it's obviously very long, it's very narrow, so that's historically accurate. It's got a diamond section with this central ridge running up it. That is a common historical design. Actually, many historical rapiers had a hexagonal section forte, but not all of them. Plenty of them were diamond section for the whole length of the blade, so that is also historically accurate. And if we look at the hilt of the sword, it's a 3-port or 3-ring swept hilt design. This is very common in the early 1600s. With the sweeping knuckle bow as well, a nice wire-bound grip, and a good-sized pommel. So this is all pretty historically accurate. Some of the proportions of the rings are not exactly right, but these are inconsequential details. So this seems like a really, really good training sword. It's pretty close to this until we come to the weight. Now, the weight of this sword is 1.1 kilograms, and the average weight of the originals is 1.3 kilograms. This is 200 grams below average. That's actually a lot in terms of the proportion of the overall sword. And as a result of this weight discrepancy, this sword doesn't actually handle like an original sword. So this is kind of strange. It's kind of a mystery, right? So the length's basically correct. The point of balance is pretty good. The overall design specifications and the shape and the size of the sword are all right, but the weight is wrong. How and why? So the answer to this mystery lies in this section here, which is called the Recastle. So this is the blunt section contained within the hilt of the sword. So basically it allows you to loop your forefinger over the guard like this to control the blade more accurately for this thrust-oriented sword. Now, This Recastle section on this reproduction weapon is, I think, maybe 5 millimeters thick. So that's in this direction. The originals are usually much thicker than that. I would say at least 6 millimeters, but usually more like 7 or 8 millimeters. Now, a difference of 1 or 2 millimeters might not seem like a lot, but the central ridge of the sword, at least in the lower part of the blade, will of course have the same thickness as the Recastle. So this Recastle is forming really the base and the foundation of the blade. And on the original swords, it gives them a very kind of sturdy, very stable dynamic. And because the ridge is quite thick, because it's derived from a thick Recastle, it gives the length of the blade quite a bit of rigidity, and therefore just quite a lot of presence, quite a lot of force and leverage when it interacts with another blade. This sword has a thin Recastle, relatively speaking, and therefore a thin central ridge, and therefore a blade which is overly flexible. Obviously, blades should be flexible to some extent, particularly training blades, but this one is a little bit too flexible. And also, it just somehow means that the mass ratio of the sword, if you like, is wrong. And there's not enough mass in the weapon as a whole, and it's distributed wrongly across the entirety of the design. So what does that mean? Well, firstly, I should say this is not a bad training sword. I've had it for years and years. It's actually of very high production quality. It's really sturdy, looks good. I've been very happy with it for a long time, but it just doesn't handle like an original sword. The devil is in the details, as they say, and the relevant detail is down here in the guard with the Recastle. So something that bothers me about the current historical fencing scene, particularly for rapier fencing, is that there's a huge focus on the aesthetics of the weapon, and also on getting the weapon to be as light and as fast as possible. But the original swords are not light, and they're actually not particularly fast. They're sturdy. And this is the key to it, the Recastle. So that's a little something to watch out for when you're trying to get a good training sword. The overall weight and point of balance and blade length have a complex interaction with each other. And if one of those elements is out of sync with the others, then it's a sign of a flawed design of a sword relative to original real weapons. So there you go. I hope that's been interesting for you, but gives you something to think about if you're considering buying a reproduction or a training weapon. But that's it for today. I'll be back in the near future with another video on a different topic. Until then, take care. Bye for now.